With the playoffs now out of reach, grinding out consistent performances in the remaining rounds of their maiden season remains the Jaegers' biggest challenge. But up against an enthusiastic home side that boasts the lion's share of the country's best under-21 talent, the Darters were always going to be hard to shake. It was turnovers, though, that proved most costly, and Hunter just gave up too much ball. It certainly wasn't without a fight. Jaegers defender Ali Tucker shrugging off more than just a shoulder injury to complete the match. The Darters home in the end, though, by 12. To a whole different playing field. The Milbrodale Mountain Off-Road Classic roaring into life with man and machine taking on the track in what doubles as the third round of the state series. Drivers raced the clock this morning for best starting spots for this afternoon's opening races, where it was all about getting out of as much dust as you could. But it wasn't just the dust blowing. This weekend is more about how far than just how fast.
There's 70, 80 cars here. I'd be surprised if any more than 15 cars finish this whole race.
And if his twin turbo machine stays on track, Newcastle's John Towers will be the one to catch tomorrow.
Carrying up to 60 kilograms of body armour, weapons and grenades, 23 recruits conducted a bunker assault using real ammunition. All the while, a Mag-58 machine gun fired over their heads, and to make it even more realistic, canisters of coloured smoke obscured their view.
We've done a lot of hard physical things, but bringing it all together at one time, that was pretty much the toughest.
The whole operation watched by the Army's top soldier, Lieutenant General Peter Lay.
Very sophisticated attack that they've just been through. It was done very safely, but it was done very proficiently, and they've demonstrated an enormous range of military skills.
The direct recruiting scheme sees former bankers, policemen, accountants, students trained directly to be elite soldiers if they are good enough. 145 have enlisted through the program this year. Less than half will succeed.
Seeing the war on terror on TV, I don't want to sit in a lounge chair.
By this time next year, they'll join the elite commandos, proficient in parachuting and amphibious operations, and a range of other specialist skills, including counter-terrorism. But who makes a good soldier?
A guy who wants to be a soldier, and it's as simple as that. Someone who wants to make a commitment to his team, someone who wants to work as part of the Australian Army, and as we say, very importantly, someone who wants to serve the nation.
During a flying visit to the Hunter today, the state's own planning guru Peter Newman dropped a political grenade, especially given that the Lower Hunter Transport Working Group, which includes Minister Costa, wants the Newcastle rail line cut at Broadmeadow.
There's no future that I can imagine where the rail system won't become more important, not less important. So the investment will be needed to upgrade it, not to cut it out.
The Commissioner believes Newcastle would be limiting its potential by ripping up the rail.
Most cities that want to be part of the global economy, and Newcastle does, need a good public transport system at their heart. If they don't have that, if it's just cars and buses, they tend to be unable to compete because the public spaces are filled with car parks and the streets are too busy.
If this issue then now reverts back to the future of 3 or 4 kilometres of railway line and misses the opportunity to plan our metropolitan future, well then that will be a pity.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Plane flights take on extra significance for basketballers.
What did you bring home?
A seat next to me, possible?
Possibly a little cramped, but Susie Batkovic probably would have walked if it meant getting to the Olympic Games.
I've always wanted it, but at times in my life I didn't think it was possible. But a few years ago I thought, yeah, okay, I can do this. Got to work really hard, and finally I got here.
Only learning the game as a teenager, it's been a great ride for the centre with next stop, Greece.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited now, but I'm sure I'll be 10 times more excited once I get there.
The entrance looks to have secured a home semi-final in Premier League hockey, despite Maitland starting the better against them at the weekend. The Central Coast side coming back to win 6-3 and maintain a spot near the top of the ladder. Wins also for West and South, while North belted Gosford by a whopping 16 goals. On the ice, what a start for the Newcastle North Stars against Sydney's Ice Dogs with Jackson Wilson's strike. Rob Stark's finish was one of 3 first-period goals against their old rivals. The home side was just too strong on its home rink, returning the favour after beaten in their last encounter, winning 8-3.
A recent survey of Hunter households found that 15% of people are struggling to pay for the medicines they need. Doctors like David Henry believe more people will struggle if the US Free Trade Agreement is approved by the Australian Parliament.
Almost every provision in the agreement is designed to reward the US manufacturers with higher prices for their products. If the government passes on those higher prices in the form of higher patient contributions, sometimes called co-payments, it means that people are going to be paying more, and they're already having difficulty affording medicines.
Pharmacists also believe the deal would see the price of many common medicines increase.
At the moment we have very less expensive medications. We get them quite cheaply from overseas, especially from America, and if we have to buy medications through the Free Trade Agreement, there's a chance that they can go up quite significantly, anything up to even 50%.
Health professionals in Australia are hoping that Labor and the minor parties will stop the passage of the agreement in the Senate. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
For sprinters, time is everything, but the last 3 weeks has been the longest of Joshua Ross's life. After being named by Athletics Australia to run the 100 metres, he had to survive subsequent appeals from Patrick Johnson. The latter arguing that after clocking the fastest ever time by an Australian last year, only injury and illness plagued his qualification. While true, Ross has been the form runner all season, and last night it was proved he'd rightly won the spot for the Games.
And you probably could have heard him yell from Stockholm where he is back to here, so he's very excited.
Ross's coach, Tony Fairweather, flies out tomorrow to join his young charge and continue their remarkable rise in the sport. Starting with the stall gift win last year, Ross is now national champion, but exceeding other people's expectations doesn't mean they've met their own.
I can't predict times, but I know he's going to be up there with them.
Ironically, Ross races with Johnson tonight in the Australian relay team at Stockholm and soon at Athens.
When this is all over, I'm sure they'll probably sit down and talk, because Patrick was Josh's idol at one time. Things might have changed a little bit in the last 3 weeks.
Jim Callanan, NBN News. It might be Hunter CHS athletes' biggest 2 days, but the weather wasn't always the best. Tomaree's Alison Grapper and Alex Hodges from Rutherford High continue their sprinting rivalry today, with Grapper backing up from success in yesterday's 200 metres to make it a winning double in the 100 today. While 14-year-old Olivia Torres was unstoppable in her 100-metre final, the Curra youngster missed setting a third record for the carnival by just a fraction of a second. It was still a big 2 days though, with new times in the 400 and 200 metres, where she bettered former World Junior representative Mindy Slomka's old mark. The girl herself was busy helping future track stars. A product of Little Athletics, Slomka helped launch a new campaign today that will attract increased levels of participation in the sport, while at the same time help keep registration costs down. Around 40,000 Little Athletes compete each summer in New South Wales. A day after referees boss Robert Finch admitted some of his whistleblowers had got things wrong at the weekend, Newcastle's leading man agreed they'd gone too far.
Personally, I think my comments in respect to the referee were out of line a little bit, and I think we need to just assess our own performance.
Captain Danny Badeiras phoned referee Jason Robinson to apologise after still lamenting his actions today, while the message to teammates was just as clear. Fighting to stay alive, a lack of time and patience has led to wholesale changes, starting with the return of Steve Witt to halfback and Matt Kennedy, who'll start up front.
We need to be fairly honest in assessing our performance. If we need to shake things upside down a bit, well, that's what we'll have to do.
Matt Parsons and Adam Woolnough have been dropped back to an extended bench, given the fitness of Ben Kennedy and Todd Lowry is still being assessed. Mark Hughes definitely won't play. He still can't even swallow after tearing his esophagus and remains in hospital. Meanwhile, the referee for Sunday's match against South Sydney is Tony Archer. He was at the middle of that decision on Friday night between the Tigers and the Bulldogs. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
Sixteen-year-old ballet students Kelly Roberts and Daniel Baker move beautifully together, but separately they're off to different corners of the globe to study their craft. Kelly from Lambton, who has studied since the age of 3 under Marie Walton Mann, will follow in the footsteps of her dancing sister Jenna, who's already making a name overseas.
I'm moving to London in 4 weeks to take up a scholarship at the Royal Ballet School in London for 3 years. And after that, hopefully I'll gain employment with a company over there or back here in Australia.
Daniel from Macquarie Hills is off to the School of American Ballet in New York.
Yeah, I'm really glad to have made it this far, and I've had a lot of help and support through my teachers and my family.
It's extremely rare for two dancers from the one school to win both McDonald's scholarships in the 1 year. The prize of $30,000 between them is expected to help kickstart two brilliant careers. For decades, Tyrrell Street has been one of the most beautiful urban treescapes in Newcastle, thanks to its lush green canopy. But this is the view today. There's been a fig massacre in the leafy street, and many passers-by have had emotional reactions.
I feel really depressed, actually. I think one of the beautiful things about Newcastle is that it has some lovely trees in it, and when you pull that out, it's like pulling the soul out of the place.
It makes me really angry.
Newcastle Council says the trees had to go because they were a danger to people.
These trees are a high hazard. They've got no proper root structure in them anymore, and they probably weigh around 20 tonne or more, and just basically sitting on a trunk.
But the real effect on people is already being felt.
Words can't express it.
And there also might be some sense of sadness and loss because when things change, generally you lose something, and so it's understandable that people will have some emotional response to it.
It makes me feel like crying. Yeah, it's really sad.
The council will eventually replace the trees with what it describes as a species better suited to the street. Paul Lobb, NBN News. Some of the cast of My Fair Lady had a warm-up today at Broadmeadow Racecourse. The show, featuring 42 local performers, opens at the Griffith Duncan Theatre on August the 18th and features NBN's Melinda Smith like you've never seen her before.
According to Upper Hunter MP George Souris, rural hospitals are already under-resourced and understaffed. He's concerned the just announced amalgamation will further isolate rural communities from decision makers.
It will be impossible for local communities to try and carry a case for retention of services, enhanced services, even equipment replacements at various hospitals will be a hard argument and a hard battle every time.
He says the board will be replaced by administrators and eventually by a CEO, only answerable to the Director-General of Health in Sydney.
What knowledge of local issues could it be imagined that a big bureaucracy headquartered in Sydney could possibly have?
The Rural Doctors Association says a centralisation of management could mean smaller rural hospitals will be forgotten and residents will have significantly less input into local health services.
So not having boards for the next 6 months will be a challenge, and I think there will be some disenfranchisement of those areas. But we're working very hard to make sure that there is some community consultation process in place.
And despite the reams of media releases being sent out by the Minister's office, there's still no details on the number of jobs lost locally in the Hunter and New England regions.
The announcement itself is disgusting in a sense that it's so vague and no one knows where the axe will fall.
Our doctors are calling it a disaster.
I've always known it's very, very bad in this region and rapidly getting worse because we do our own counting. But it's actually much worse than I thought and getting much worse faster than I thought.
Figures released in the Australian Doctors Weekly magazine show that Cessnock faces the worst GP shortage in urban New South Wales and the 6th worst in urban Australia. The town currently has one doctor for every 2,500 people, well below the state average. Meanwhile, the Hunter and Central Coast make up 6 of the 7 worst areas for shortages, losing as many as 10 GPs every year. Dr Sprogus says the situation has become increasingly worse over the past 5 years, compounded by a lack of federal government funding and a drop in medical school and university places.
We need a regional solution. The Minister for Health needs to sit down with our region and discuss seriously, not fighting it out in the press, seriously discuss a regional solution.
Federal Health Minister Tony Abbott this week defended Australia's health system, saying it hasn't reached crisis point and that there's no situation that can't be sorted by people working in a constructive manner. Colleen West, NBN News.
It's been 12 years since the international body of the Chito-Ryu karate style has called Newcastle home for the World Championship. Held every 3 years, few of today's competitors would have been in the sport at the last such cup, but all seem to be making up for lost time.
Some of the fastest people I've ever seen are down here. Some of the Japanese came in early and were training with us, I think to check us out a little bit, and they were blinding fast.
Hayes is a fair judge. He was grand champion at the last cup. This time round, though, it's many of his students who are fighting for glory, including the region's youngest black belt, Ben Forsyth. Winning gold early in the day, in the sparring or kumite, things really got tough, and he was eliminated in the first round. It continues tomorrow, though, with the seniors taking centre stage. An Australian amateur representative, Vicky Tutt, made the jump in January to the professional ranks. Now a first-year trainee, the 27-year-old is banking on experience to help her in this 4-round tournament that allows for few mistakes.
Oh, you can't have a bad day, so even when you aren't playing well, you have to dig it out because, every round counts for an average, and the guys are such good players and such solid players.
One of 9 female players, they're all keen to leave an impression on the men.
As much as the guys make you feel at home, you want to go out and you want to beat the boys.
The one everyone has to stop, you'd think, is last year's winner Martin Joyce. Now a third-year trainee, Joyce was the only golfer to finish under par last year and knows it will be just as tough this time around as everyone fights for the lion's share of the $30,000 up for grabs.
Yes, I am defending champion, but
as we all know, when we go and play this week, it's a golf course that generally wins.
The field of 125 tees off tomorrow morning. As for the resort, it continues to trade under the management of receivers. Up for sale, there has been offers of interest, but no deal is likely soon. Jim Callanan, NBN News. It was like a huge weight had been lifted from their shoulders. Players soaking up a win that had been long overdue, with one overriding emotion.
I think it was a bit of relief amongst the players and staff. I suppose a bit of a thing off our back. I think.
Yeah, we sung the victory song yesterday, so we were a bit rusty on that.
South stands to a different beat, making them work for everything. Joe Williams and Owen Craigie causing all sorts of headaches in the first half. Some familiar sights led the revival, with Matt Gidley providing Steve Witt with a try to highlight his return to the top grade. But it was in the second half that the Knights really played like their season depended on it. Behind a pack that did the job, Newcastle's backs capitalised. And while it wasn't all pretty, it was effective.
We're still in the 8. I was still in the running for the 8, which is a good thing for the club, and we've got a lot to play for over the next few weeks.
That starts with the Raiders on Saturday night, but whether Matt Parsons or Daniel Abraham can return in time isn't yet clear.
It was a match that had just about everything, except goals. South Cardiff's slim chances of sneaking into the top 4 were hanging on a win, and they threw everything at Lake Macquarie. Goalkeeper Greg Asquith put his body on the line to deny the Gunners, while down the other end Lake Macquarie also failed to break the last line of defence. The Gunners' two-man defensive wall worked beautifully, but Lake Macquarie's one-man wall backfired completely. Every player's worst nightmare left Sean Matthews in plenty of pain, but fortunately he suffered no serious injury. South Cardiff's best chance to break the nil-all deadlock summed up the night. Although the goalie was out of the picture, the Gunners' top striker, Mitchell Henry, couldn't land the winning blow. The draw leaves South Cardiff 7 points out of the top 4 with 2 matches remaining and mathematically no chance of making the finals. Highfields Azuri and Hamilton will battle for 4th spot. Todd Nardi, NBN News.
For many of us, there's nothing better than slipping into a warm bed on a cold wintry night, but that electric blanket keeping you toasty warm does have its dangers. According to the New South Wales Fire Service, about 1/3 of all house fires in winter are caused by electric blankets.
Some people leave them on so that their bed will be warm when they come home, but from a fire safety point of view, it's not advisable to do.
And here's proof of the potential devastating effects. It's believed an electric blanket was the cause of a blaze in a duplex at Aberglasslyn this morning. One bedroom was gutted while the rest of the house was damaged by heat and smoke.
The investigations by the brigade have shown that it was caused by a fault in the electric blanket in the bedroom. It's believed that it was left turned on after the occupants had left the house this morning and it's overheated.
Inspector Peter Smith says it's vital that electric blankets, especially older ones, are checked thoroughly, including their cords and switches.
One of the best things that they can do is check them on a regular basis. When they've been stored for any length of time, they need to be tested, run on the bed before people get into it.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Look out, Hunter Pirates. The Jaegers are spreading their wings. Basketball on the agenda for the season's final training session this morning. With the Jaegers' semi-final hopes grounded weeks ago, the Hunter side had a relaxed preparation for tonight's clash with the Melbourne Phoenix, who are sitting third on the ladder. However, the Jaegers are serious about holding on to fifth spot and denting the pride of one of the premiership favourites.
So, we need to play very well tonight and upset the Phoenix hopefully before they hit the finals.
The big question, can the Jaegers stop Australia's #1 shooter, Melbourne's Sherelle McMahon? The goalkeeper with the toughest job in national netball tonight will be Hunter's Ali Tucker.
Yeah, they've got Sherelle McMahon in the team, who is the best netballer in the world.
In their first season, the Jaegers have led the national competition in crowd figures, and expected 4,000 spectators may just see a Hunter upset from 7:30.
They're bringing a great arsenal with them tonight to play against us, but stranger things have happened.
It's the final round in Newcastle Rugby League tomorrow, with Raymond Torres needing to win and hope Cessnock lose in order to make the semis. And in NBN soccer, Western's clash with Hamilton highlights round 17 action.
Professor Nicholas Saunders is his name, and from now on expect to hear that name a whole lot more. He's the new Vice-Chancellor and frontman of the University of Newcastle, and it was a unanimous decision by the selection committee to appoint him to the prestigious yet challenging position.
And being a Vice-Chancellor is being, if you like, the Chief Executive of a very diverse, complex, dynamic organisation, and that brings with it a lot of challenges. I don't think being a Vice-Chancellor is an easy job by any means, but I'm looking forward to it.
Professor Saunders is currently the advisor to the Vice-Chancellor at Monash University and has a wealth of experience. His academic career began as the Professor of Medicine at Newcastle University. He says he's thrilled to be back. And you can expect plenty of change and growth at the university. According to Professor Saunders, it'll be change for the better.
I'm looking for it to grow. I'm looking for it to grow in terms of domestic students. That'll largely happen down in Rimba on the Central Coast. But I'm also looking for to grow through international students and through research students as well.
He'll take over from Roger Holmes in October. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
No first season finals fairy tale for the Jaegers, but they have won a flock of fans. Another near-capacity crowd at the entertainment centre saw Australia's top shooter Sherelle McMahon land Melbourne a 3-point half-time lead. Lara Wellham shot at 90% for the Jaegers. And with a little help, she gave top four side Melbourne a serious fright. Kirsty Monaghan came on to slam 7 goals in the final quarter. With 5 left on the clock, the Jaegers trailed by just 1. The crowd sensed an upset. But Sherelle McMahon steadied the Phoenix, her 32 goals proving the difference. The Jaegers lost their last match by 8, but completed a very competitive first season in the National League. Todd Nardi, NBN News. What a difference 12 months has made for Cessnock. In today's final round, the defending premiers simply had to beat competition also Rans Macquarie to cling to a top 5 spot. But it was the Macquarie Scorpions who looked more like the semi-final contender, a quick tap from quick-thinking hooker Matt Pearce opening the scores. It was a very nervous Cessnock. Macquarie dominated possession and turned it into points, halfback Kurt Stocks doing the damage as the Scorpions created a 12-4 lead. The speed of winger Chris Pine gave the boost Cessnock desperately needed. The Premiers fought their way back to level the scores at 22 all late in the match, and try as they might, neither side could break the deadlock. That draw means Cessnock will play Raymond Terrace in a playoff for 5th on Monday night, while the Blues will get 2 bites at the cherry in the semi-finals after moving into 3rd. Todd Nardi, NBN News. It's a novel way to spend your Sunday morning, a casual 70-kilometre ride from Newcastle toward Port Stephens and back. And pedal power must be catching on. Nearly 1,000 cyclists brought motorists to a standstill on Industrial Drive, Mayfield, during the annual Hunter Bike Run. The best way for some to do it was with a little help from Dad, especially upon reaching Newcastle's version of Heartbreak Hill, many starting to feel the pain as they tackled the Stockton Bridge. In its 9-year history, the Hunter Bike Run has raised more than $170,000 for various local charities, and this year they were pumping the quads for Camp Quality.
We're working this year for Camp Quality, and we're hoping to raise over $30,000 today to help Camp Quality.
It's an inspiring time of the year. Olympics are on, Tour de France. It's all good.
Todd Nardi, NBN News. If GWH Building has its way, a service centre including a petrol station and a number of fast food restaurants will be constructed at the northern end of the Karua bypass. Today, Justice David Lloyd from the State's Land and Environment Court inspected the proposed site. The developers are taking Great Lakes Council to court for not determining its development application. Council says it's against any new service stations on the highway in the Shire. Karua businesses are strongly opposed to the service centre. They're clinging to a hope that motorists will drive into the town after the bypass is completed in October.
As well as the coaches that come to our service station, which we rely on, which is the reason why we're staying open, they will go to the service centre as well.
There isn't enough local residents to keep our butcher shop and our chemist shop and our newsagents going entirely.
While GWH Building says the service centre would give Karua an economic boost with up to 65 new full-time jobs, it is also facing opposition from the Boola-Dealer business community.
If people come on the Karua bypass, they see this huge service centre. If they stop there, they're not going to stop in Boola-Dealer half an hour up the road.
The NRMA says it would like to comment on the merits of a service centre on the bypass, but lacks the resources to do so. The two-day Land and Environment Court hearing starts tomorrow. Todd Nardi, NBN News.
In the early hours of this morning, residents of Fawcett Street, Mayfield, woke to hear men brawling in a lane behind the Beaufort Hotel. The alarm was raised at 6:30 when a neighbour entered this unit, which backs onto the alley, and found a 33-year-old man dead with extensive lacerations to his neck and head. Another man, aged 27, who lives in the unit, was discovered on the lounge with compound skull fractures. He was taken to the John Hunter Hospital in a serious condition and underwent surgery.
A neighbour heard a scuffle around 4:30am, and between 4:30am and 6:20am, an incident has occurred in this townhouse at the back of the Beaufort Hotel.
Police are investigating information that a third person was involved in the brutal killing. Officers scoured nearby yards and searched rooftops for a weapon, which police believe could be a machete.
We haven't located a weapon. We don't believe firearms are involved. It appears that an object has been used to strike both the males around the head.
A neighbour who wouldn't speak on camera said a man who came out of the laneway asked her husband to call an ambulance at 6:30am, then took off up the street. Police are now appealing to the public for information. If anyone heard or saw anything in the laneway behind the Beaufort Hotel in the early hours of this morning, should contact Waratah Police. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News. Armed with placards and cold hard facts, these hunter carers and their clients have rebuked state government reforms to programs for school leavers with a disability. Under the changes, disabled people will be assisted in finding employment, but it means existing daycare programs will be cut. Like many others in the region, funding for the care of Jonathan Ponson has been slashed from $16,000 a year to $9,000.
It's important for us because we couldn't do what they do. Otherwise, our whole life would be entirely just Jonathan only.
Adam Pye will now receive care 2 days a week instead of 5.
What am I going to do with him for 3 days a week? I'm looking at having to give up my work, give up my opportunity to develop myself to stay at home and look after Adam.
There may be congregate care where you have one carer with maybe a group of 5 or 6. And for people with high support needs, trying to support them in the community at that level is going to reduce the quality of care.
The Minister for Disability Services, Carmel Tebbit, says the reforms aren't intended to reduce hours for clients. Instead, they're aimed at providing long-term certainty to young people. She has welcomed public submission on the reforms. Colleen West, NBN News.
Much of the hopes for the Pirates' second season in the NBL has been pinned on this man, former Sydney Kings premiership winning guard Kavossi Franklin. And last night the star American import showed he has the match-winning quality the Hunter desperately needs.
But he's certainly got the leadership and he's got the explosiveness, and he certainly is a real spark plug.
While only a trial match, last night's season opener in Maitland was an impressive start for the Pirates. A determined defensive effort saw the Hunter men spend plenty of time on the boards and drew particular praise from coach Adrian Hurley.
I was quite surprised, I think, that we went as well as we did. There was a lot of cohesion there, a lot of understanding.
The touring University of Nebraska showed they were a quality trial match opponent for the Pirates, making the Hunters' 11-point victory a creditable start to the pre-season. The Pirates may have up to another 10 trials before the NBL tips off at the end of September, and there's plenty of players still due to come back from injury. Brendan Mann and Larry Davidson are recovering from ankle injuries, while the Hunter still hasn't seen its other American import, guard Clayton Shields, part of the long injury list.
I think that happens in any pre-season. Clayton hyperextended his knee in practice on Monday, so he should be out for a week. Larry Davison's still got another week to go with an ankle injury, which we're still going to get some scans on.
Todd Nardi, NBN News.
Every year, the Australian Department of Defence spends $6 billion maintaining, repairing and building new craft, and it will continue to do so for the next 10 years. Today, a group of Hunter business people were told that a piece of that $60 billion pie isn't out of reach.
There are local businesses here that deliver internationally real niche capabilities, and those sort of industries are the industries that Defence wants to do business with.
Already, Newcastle-based shipbuilder Forjax and the Hunter branch of ADI have fulfilled several defence contracts, including the construction of a fleet of mine hunters for the Australian Navy and half a dozen amphibious watercraft for the Army. So far, the Defence Department has been impressed by the standard of work delivered by Novocastrian businesses, and it expects to continue providing jobs for the region into the future.
Air-to-air tankers will probably be here. The airborne warning and control aircraft will be here. There is obviously further work that could be done in terms of the JSF program.
Jessica Phyllis, NBN News. Once upon a time, there were no mansions in Port Stephens, and the people roamed around carefree, living off the land and the sea.
We used to wander everywhere up there. There was hardly any houses, and you can go anywhere. If you wanted to fish, you just threw the line off the beach and you'd get fish. You had oysters all around the rocks. It was really an ideal life.
For Viola Brown, Val Merrick, Carol Ridgway-Bissett, Gwen Russell and two of their friends, life in Port Stephens couldn't have been better. And although it wasn't that long ago, their way of life was very different to the one many of us would know. To these women, working and doing chores was just part of a natural process, adding to the family's well-being. It was never thought of as a trial. Now their experiences have been immortalised in the 5th instalment of a series of books on Aboriginal women and their heritage.
Usually Aboriginal women's stories are not told, it's usually the men. And it's really good to get through to people that we have a history too.
Their stories can be downloaded from the Department of Environment and Conservation website. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
It's the third fatality involving trucks on New South Wales roads in as many days. It's believed a 30-year-old man from Cessnock who was driving this Holden ute was on his way to work at Singleton around 6 o'clock. He almost made it there. Police believe he crossed to the wrong side of the highway, just 3 kilometres short of his destination.
Shortly before 6 o'clock this morning, a northbound utility has collided with a semi-trailer carrying cattle. As a result of the collision, the driver of the utility has been killed.
The semi ran off the road and came to rest in a nearby paddock, then burst into flames. Almost unbelievably, the driver freed himself from the wreck. Some cattle also survived. The truck driver was taken to Singleton Hospital with minor injuries. The highway was closed until 2 o'clock this afternoon. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News. It's a picture the club wishes it could paint more often, an army of fit players and even those injured today displaying few signs of former battle scars. Daniel Abraham is fighting the clock. The 23-year-old workhorse must prove his fitness by Saturday if he's to face the Sea Eagles.
Yeah, the ankle got a little bit sore towards the end, but I got through the session, so that's all I can ask, I suppose.
Abraham is confident he'll be added to the bench, replacing Regan Tanner. But where there's optimism, there's also caution.
If it takes another week, well, it does. I don't want to go back early and then spend the rest of the season on the sideline.
A hip injury may have slowed Josh Perry down, but a quick recovery could earn the forward a spot in the run-on side.
At the start of the week, I couldn't do a few things in the cardio and I got through all that today, so that's encouraging.
And while Mark Hughes will play in the Premier League this week, it's hoped the inclusion of Adam Woolnough in the first-grade outfit will boost the Knights' final hopes, which are hanging in the balance.
It's a good vibe around the joint at the moment, a couple of wins on the trot, and everyone's looking forward to Sunday. Hopefully make that 3 and get back in the top 8.
Colleen West, NBN News. Some may call it jumping the gun, but Newcastle United likes to refer to it as forward planning.
If we didn't start talking to players that have been on our roster before, we would be leaving our run too late. We have to start planning as of now.
On September 29, the club will learn whether it has been successful in its bid to make the National Australian Soccer League. It's one of 12 clubs vying for just 8 spots in a competition that's aimed at lifting the game's profile.
Fundamentally, it's the last shot.
Former Newcastle captain Robbie Middleby has knocked back attractive offers to play for overseas clubs. And he says while it's a huge risk relying on a side that may not even exist, it's one he's willing to take.
It was a season where I was hindered with an injury most of the season, so I haven't fulfilled the dream that I wanted to come back here and win a championship. So that's still a burning desire.
There's also a major trump card for the club and its players, with former English mentor Terry Venables named the new coach.
With Newcastle trying to put their foot forward with appointing a coach already and having their ideas, I really want to be part of it.
Colleen West, NBN News.
There were certainly no attendance concerns at this Diocese Synod, taking in Anglicans from the Hunter, Central Coast and Manning regions. With the number of churchgoers falling in recent years, it's feared some smaller parishes could be absorbed unless they, quite literally, think outside the square.
We have worked in the past on an attraction model, the come to us model, and we're looking at new ways of being church, of going to the people rather than expecting them to come to us.
For many, the church house is the pillar of parish life, but as this synod heard, some services are hosting just a faithful few.
The building is often sort of a barrier, and we want to build bridges into the community rather than barriers.
And it's on these bridges where Newcastle's Anglican Diocese intends to reconnect with past parishioners, attempting to establish the church's future by mixing cultures.
Well, some of the fresh expressions that are being trialled are cafe churches where people come and sit around a table, and there's an emphasis on community and being free to ask their questions.
Adam McIlrick, NBN News.
By the way South started, you thought it was going to be another one of those games for Gosford. Down an early goal, the home side though hit back with a reply that belied their position on the table. Soon into the lead with a second, they piled on the pressure, capitalising on a mix-up at the back that had Souths down 3-1. That was before John Finance led the revival with 4 goals to grab them a 5-4 victory. In the final round of NBN Soccer, wins for Western, Edgeworth, Adamstown and Broadmeadow to complete the regular season. It left the Bears with their first minor premiership since 1996 and with a major semi-final berth against the Eagles. Broadmeadow and Hamilton will meet in the minor semi-final. Meanwhile, the Newcastle North Stars backed up from an overtime win in Adelaide to beat Melbourne yesterday by 5 goals and remain the outright leaders in the National Ice Hockey League. Confirmation too that the league will expand next year, with the Erina Rhinos one of 2 sides to join the competition.
There's a state of origin-like battle brewing over access to the national grid power supply, or lack thereof, to customers in the Sunshine State.
And I don't think that any state should lose power just because one state goes down, like New South Wales, unless it's surplus power.
Queensland is among 4 states to share in a national network of power conducted by NEMCO, the National Electricity Market Management Company. On Friday night, 5 power generating units, 3 of those at Bayswater, stopped running after an explosion at a nearby switchyard. Within 5 minutes, 250,000 homes in Queensland were without electricity, some say due to that state's run-down power grid. Industrial users in New South Wales, Victoria and South Australia also reported blackouts, among them the Tomago and Kurri Kurri aluminium smelters. A spokesperson for Transgrid says while workers attempted to fix the problem, some New South Wales homes were being supplied with power from the Snowy Mountains scheme. Why that didn't extend to Queensland is the subject of investigation. Adam McIlrick, NBN News.
Weighing in at 500 tonnes, this new 8-strand Austrian-manufactured rope closer will be a pivotal part of the future for One Steel's Newcastle wire rope plant. The $14 million upgrade, expected to be completed by the end of the year, secures 100 jobs and is the biggest technology change on the factory floor in 30 years.
This is the latest technology, being able to go to 8 strands. For a long time there's been 6 strands, but we can go up to 200mm diameter, 8 strands. You're talking about a very specialised product.
The finished product that will roll off the production line is mainly destined for use by drag lines at open-cut coal mines. One Steel admits it's a tough market, and they also want the product exported to the United States.
Very tough customers, they know what they want, you've got to perform, BHP, Rio, but we're a very good supplier, we're investing to be a good supplier in the future, and we really look after them.
And One Steel's 1,700 Newcastle employees are also being looked after at present, with some of the returns from back-to-back record profits being reinvested in other local operations.
We've just finished spending $11 million in a new fence post plant. We have a number of smaller projects that are underway at the moment, so capital's starting to come into the businesses here in Newcastle.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
This is not a new issue for the University of Newcastle. It's not a new issue for any Australian university. These matters do occur from time to time.